Hello, hello, my dear Earthlings. How have you been? How was your week? Hope all was well. Welcome back. Here we are, still episode 9, but part 2 with the great Adam Cartier. This is the second and last part until he lands again on Planet Joe. If you haven't heard the first half last week, I highly recommend you going back there and listening to it, because we're picking up from where we left off last week. So, welcome back. Missed you, and I hope you enjoy the second half of episode 9 with Adam Cartier. Fasten your brain safety belt. We're about to launch.
You are about to launch to Planet Joe. Please enter the pod and fasten the brain safety belt. This planet is intended for mature humans only. If you are the sapient type that gets offended easily, please exit the pod immediately. Enjoy your visit on Planet Joe Pod. Launching now.
So I'm not sure, and I've not thought about this enough, that I don't have a clear position on it. Mm-hmm. Esther Perel and Helen Fisher are two anthropologists who are geniuses, especially Esther Perel, in my mind at least. She's genius on the subject. And they talk about ideas, for example, where like you share what you may be thinking or fantasizing about, or like you may check out a girl and do it collectively, like, oh my God, look how hot that girl's ass is, right? Yeah. And it's like, so that way you don't feel like you're kind of hiding that kind of natural instinct. But, you know, that being said, like Esther Perel is actually an example, because she's like, her whole career is exploring the idea of open relationships. Right. She is monogamous, married, and it's like, so she clearly sees the compromise and has decided to live this way despite being completely open to to these ideas. And who knows, time will tell. Maybe she will explore kind of having a secondary love and that kind of thing.
And even if not, nothing's wrong with it. I mean,
yeah, look,
that's what fits her thing. But
I guess what's natural for me is not necessarily what's always right in the moment, I think. And it reminds me of this, what you said last time, this Marilyn Monroe quote about, I go with nature when it comes about sex. But last week, I was in a situation post-wedding where I was with a beautiful girl, absolutely stunning, way out of my league. And I'm saying that, like, not that I don't try to go for girls out of my league, but like she's way, way more good looking than I am. And under normal circumstances, if she wasn't wasted, probably wouldn't have thought twice about going home with me so easily.
Give herself more credit.
Okay, I'm not gonna knock myself down, but she is a stunning girl.
Yeah.
And long story short, like one thing led to another. We ended up in bed together, and she was completely drunk, telling me that she wants me, and that and everything in my nature was like, oh my God, this is like the best opportunity ever. Like, as in, like, when like this, like one of the most good looking girls that I've ever made out with at this point, like what's going to happen next? And I didn't because she was like too drunk.
Yeah.
And I ended up sleeping over at her place and like not even taking my jeans off, not even going down to my boxers, because I kind of knew that if I took my jeans off, like I wouldn't be able to hold myself back. And, everything that nature would dictate in that moment would suggest that I should just go for it, because we can just have safe sex. And she was certainly consensual.
Yeah.
But then in hindsight, when we spoke about it the next day and we kind of retrospectively looked over it, she was like, you know what, like, I'm really glad that, like, she told me, Adam, like, I'm glad that you didn't kind of
did anything.
I wouldn't even say take advantage of the situation. It wasn't like that. And
Right, even if it would have happened, it wouldn't be like taking advantage of it.
But like
good man, yeah, you're just.
but the point is that like kind of that decision was not based. It wasn't a natural decision.
Right.
It was overriding. If there's anything about human nature, it's that we are able to override our nature.
Right.
And that's why I guess originally I asked you whether it's better to have.
But that's
this
different.
natural...
Over here, you're talking about being intoxicated, being drunk. That's different. That's when your judgment comes in, where you have to fight the natural urge. And when you told me the story before, like it was at work or whatever, I told you that I had times when it was like that. And for me personally, it's a turn off to have sex with a girl that's so drunk. Even if she's into it, and like I said, she'll like fuck me, do me now, whatever. Even if she's like that, it takes away from the fun yeah, I forgot to mute the computer. Sorry, guys.
We're not perfect, guys. We're not angels. Okay,
it's okay.
Let's have a bit of
2.5 hours, one bling. It's okay.
Yeah, just about. Hopefully they'll forgive you.
Hopefully. Yeah. So where were we?
Essentially, you were saying that because somebody's drunk and throwing themselves at you.
It's not fun. Even for us as men, I don't know. There is a fun part to it of sex, drunk sex, but it's not as fun as, being like sober, like really being there.
Yeah, but I think that I could kind of go down the argument and say it's natural and I'll take what I can get. I mean, keeping it safe. I'm not saying to do something where...
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess it's quite possible that she was just telling me what I wanted to hear the next day. Or that she was kind of rationalizing it for herself that it didn't happen, and she's saying, "I'm glad it didn't happen." So, who knows what the parallel reality would have been. I do think that
you're reminding me that I had moments and times in my life, specifically 3 that I hugely regret when you're talking about like out of the league situations what I had and alcohol or whatever, and nothing happened. So I understand like this is the male, monkey genes talking.
Yeah.
Like I freaking had the fruit in front of me and I didn't do anything.
Telling me no, but my body.
And yeah, you're right. It's like even when you talk to the girl after, it's like, oh, you're so kind and so like such a gentleman, blah blah. I'm like, fuck, like gentleman, my ass.
I don't want to be the nice guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I'm the goddamn Satan.
Yeah. So yeah, I had specifically 3 like really hot chicks situations that it didn't go through because of like nice guy or I was considerate or whatever. And to this day, see, I have a count like 3.
So let me ask you first. Do you think that? Do you agree with me that the number one thing that defines human beings is our ability to overcome or override nature? As opposed to human beings, as opposed to just humans.
I mean, in the context of what we talked about when it comes to sex urges, I agree with you. But in general, I don't know what you mean. But
I can. There's two roads we can go down here. One's transgender, the other one is gay. Okay, there are many more roads, but they're the 2 that I'm going to put to you. So. A very, very common religious interpretation of homosexual thoughts is that it is your divine responsibility to overcome your natural urge to have gay sex and realize that God doesn't want you to do it. So they will use the argument where they say that like just because it's biological doesn't mean that it's something that you should do because we are human beings, and
they say that about sex before marriage as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, they contradict themselves because Absolutely. When it comes to transgender, they will kind of say the opposite. So that in transgender, they will be like, yeah, but there's a biological reality. But essentially, transgender will basically say that, like, yeah, I have my genetics and I have my XY chromosomes, or vice versa, XX chromosomes. Like, that doesn't define who I am. The fact that I'm a human being means I override that. And that, like we're such cultural animals that, like, I essentially can define myself however I choose. That's the power of my mind. That's the power of society, essentially. And so I guess that's my question, is that, do you think that our existence is more of, like, kind of this reality of us being natural animals and kind of figuring out how to most closely align ourselves with a natural way of being? Or is it kind of like this balance with our culture?
I don't think it's even supposed to be like hard work. If you go with your urges, and I think I told you this before, as long as you don't harm another human being or property, if it's an urge, you should go for it.
What if your urge is transgender and your urge is to cut off your schmeckle?
Do it.
That's not harmful.
To yourself?
Yeah.
No, if that's what your urge, and this is what you want, and this is who you are. You know that. Like, the transsexual people know that that's who they are. They're not cutting it off and thinking, oh my God, what if I regret it? They don't think for a second.
Is there an age component here? If you're a teenager, what age is it fixed?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, but yeah, that's a tricky one. I don't know. To me, I guess, for me to be the most non-biased as possible, I can only compare it as a father and having a 7-year-old and saying, if my son tomorrow comes out and says, I'm a woman and I want to be a woman, I'll fully support him, but I'll never allow him to have a surgery or a surgical change until he's 18. And that's only to protect, and it's going back to what you're saying, if he changes his mind. That's the only reason why I'd protect him, for him to be old enough, just so he won't regret it. That's the only reason why I would do it.
So I think that there's an important difference between supporting him and being neutral towards it. Because I think that if you support it, you can reinforce it.
Nuh-uh.
You don't think so?
No. If an 8-year-old boy thinks he's a woman or feels he's a woman, if an 8-year-old girl feels that she's a boy, I don't think it's a trend. I don't think it's something that child saw in a movie. You already know. And not only that, it's been proven from parents of transsexual or homosexual kids. They've kind of picked up from an early age where it's going to go, even though many of them try to hide it or ignore it. But many parents were interviewed, and it's been proven that as like adult gay people, they knew from an early age where it's going to go. They knew their feelings.
Isn't it a self-fulfilling prophecy to say that they saw a trajectory of where this is going to go? Because as parents, they mold that.
Okay, I mean, so you're saying it's nurture?
I'm saying that,
you're saying, do you believe for a second that if your parents would support you being gay, and they thought because you played with actually, I'm a great example of that. My mom actually confessed when I was 16 for the first time that she thought I was gay. I think I brought it up in the first sex episode.
My family also think I'm gay, but yeah.
Because I loved playing with girls. I loved playing with dolls. Anything, just being around girls for me was like the ultimate. Like I can listen to gossip. I loved sitting with my mom and her girlfriends and like she told me, like, literally, I thought that you were gay, like, because of that. So that's a great example. Maybe she would reinforce it, and I would turn out gay. No, it's quite the opposite, because I love women before puberty.
He's just compensating. So, okay.
You know how many times I said I wish I was gay?
It's so much easier, right?
It's so much. Oh my God.
So, okay. So I've got
the abundance of sex for the gay guys.
There was a common theory about the blank slate, which was essentially this idea that you are born a blank slate and everything that you get nurtured with and your culture is what defines who you are. And, you know, this biological reality or your genetics are just pretty much redundant in the larger scheme of things about human lifestyle, and that like so many of the things are about the way that we behave are constructed.
There was a horrible experiment on that. I don't know if you've seen that Netflix.
I haven't, but that is where I'm going. That is where
triplets.
I'm going.
They separated them on purpose for this research.
Really?
When they were born, triplets. Different states.
The best experiments were before science became ethical.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They used to like shock
yeah,
people.
it is shock. Like they separated triplets for the fuck's sake. When you see it, you're like, and they followed them and they went to their homes and their adopting parents didn't know that they're actually, the scientists are actually researching to see if those triplets are going to grow up the same with the same thoughts and feelings and different types of nurture, and they were kind of the same. So the point was, and this is agreeing with what you just said, is that it's not true. It's completely debunked, this idea that people are born a blank slate. But we are undoubtedly a cocktail of our nature and our nurture and our environment. I mean, there's this thing called epigenetics, which are like certain genes that will fire because you like go through some environmental situation, like a lot of stress, cortisol. Okay. So let's say someone like Caitlyn Jenner becomes a national celebrity in America. Let's say
hypothetically, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
The idea that wouldn't reinforce the idea that transgenderism is kind of accepted is of course not true. I think so that's that far. So then we can have a separate discussion about whether it is true. But let's first say that like as environmental creatures and as cultural creatures, as a kid you would be influenced by that. You would be more open to the idea that you could be transgender. And I think that there are situations where people might have just phases where they may be gay, they may be transgender, they may be this, they may be that.
I don't think it's a phase, not for a child.
Well, I don't know. I actually have no clue. I plead ignorance and cluelessness. But I do think that there needs to be something of a kind of stubborn idea about what's normal, and then being completely open to the fact that like some people have different ways of living, but there is still kind of a normal reality. It's still heterosexual. It's still the normal. It's still the norm.
Right. Yeah.
And being cisgender, which I think is a funny term, but anyway, being like the same, your gender aligning with your biological sex is the norm. So that's not denying that people are gay or that people may be transgender, but like clearly that is the minority.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to say.
Right.
And then it's kind of like, well, if somebody is kind of tipping their toe in, let's say, the unconventional way of living, you should never, berate someone for that. You shouldn't reject it or go against it. But I also don't think you should support it. I think there's this kind of this neutral place where you're just kind of like, whatever you choose, fine. But there's a difference between doing that and supporting it.
Well, saying whatever you choose, that's supporting it.
Okay.
Not encouraging wear a dress. You should wear a dress. I didn't mean that. I mean, like, whatever you choose, I'm with you.
Okay. If supporting...
You're not going to get resistance. That's what I meant.
That's fine. Okay.
That's
if it
support,
doesn't get to a point...
It?
Well, okay. So I would differentiate between support and encouragement.
Oh,
which is what you've done. But I originally thought when you said support, I thought you meant encouragement.
No. Whatever you feel, there's no resistance. You want to wear a dress and you're 8, that's fine. But I'm not going to say, hey, look, I bought you a pink dress.
I think
an 8-year-old.
It's funny that this really like... But
if he would say, Dad, buy me a dress, I wouldn't make him feel bad for a second. I would say, I don't know. I'm trying to realize it. I would be surprised.
But would you buy the dress?
Yes.
Ooh, active collaborator.
But that's after a talk and trying to understand. And also, here's the thing. The only delay that I would have, it's the repercussion he would have from society. That's what would scare me more than anything.
Okay. I remember.
So I would be, for now, wear the dress at home. Don't go out with it.
So, of course, not
But
naming names. Someone in my immediate family came out. Another member was really in tears, not because of the situation, but because of she or he knows that there's kind of this reality in society which would mean that his life would be even more difficult. And we've already spoken about how difficult life is as default and how tragic life is as a default. And there's just something else to throw in the pile. Like to live your own truth is like going to be rejected.
But here's the thing. That's why I'm saying support, because when it comes to difficulty, it's only by the closest people to you. Because if you're supported by your family, and not only your immediate family and your friends, your close circle, you don't give a fuck about society, and that's been proven. People that came out at an early age and they were supported, they didn't give a fuck that society were like looked down upon gays. But they were like, my mom loved me, my dad loved me, my cousins, everybody accepted me. I had all the power to stand against society's rejection.
But as open-minded you need to be to the idea that someone might be different, you also have to be open-minded to the idea that someone is normal. So, and I please everyone take the nuance of normal. I don't mean
I was gonna say
when I say normal, I mean the average.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So that when somebody wants to explore and experiment and try new things, then go for it, but don't close the door on what on the alternative. It's not like you've gone down this road and there's no turning back. And I think that sometimes what happens is, especially in today's climate, that someone, for example, may choose to be transgender, let's say, and they're kind of paraded for it in this way that it's like you're solidifying their identity. You're not giving them the breathing space to figure it out for themselves. You're kind of jumping on their bandwagon. And it's like, this is such an individual thing. And
No, I'm saying give them the space. But supporting by saying, I'm with you. I love you no matter what. Your dad or your mom's going to love you no matter what. We're with you, but not encouraging it, but give them the space to process it.
Okay, so your biggest conjecture on sexuality is that it's natural, right?
Right.
Is transgenderism natural?
Absolutely.
So what do you mean by natural? Like in a relativist.
Okay, it's different for society. That doesn't make it unnatural. And I'll give you I don't know, extreme other example of being born deformed. Is that not natural? It's not accepted by society.
No, but
it's natural. People are born. Yeah, that's.
I don't think I get it. I think that it's not natural to take hormones or to have invasive procedure.
It's also not natural to eat vitamins and to, I don't know,
and to wear clothes,
enhancements to look good, but it's healthy and it helps. It's not natural, but it's something that we added. It's an additive.
Okay, so I see this as a balance.
So that's an additive to match that person and who wants to be a woman, so they can take hormones and they can really look. That's science actually for them.
So I think that this is the balance between the subjective and the objective. And I wrestle with this all the time. I think that this is where the objective matters. And this is where I think that the relativist way of everyone having their own truth is problematic. So let me give you an example. I think, for example, the 3 untruths I spoke for, I think that it's objective truth that you prepare the child for the road, that that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's not entirely true, but most things that don't kill you make you stronger. And that a human heart is cut down the middle in terms of good and evil. Those are objective truths, and I don't think that any subjective interpretation of that, I don't care, because I see it as objective truth. And I therefore, like, when I look at like a biological reality of genetics, I see that as an objective truth of genetics. So where does the subjectivity come in? It's society, culture. Right. So that's the subjective part. Mm-hmm. So then we need to kind of decide as kind of patrons of our society and ambassadors, and kind of we're going to be around for a good few years. Like, what do we allow? What do we tolerate? And what do we reject? And I have a problem with certain ideas being openly accepted as opposed to neutrally accepted. And when I think about the human experience, like for me, the human experience is having an objective kind of mold of how you see the world and then falling short of it. Like our humanity is in realizing that we fall short. If you have a completely subjective way of living, there's no way to fall short, because there's no kind of ideal and there's no concept of progress either, right? If there's no objective goal, then how can you progress? Because it's like, how can you say that this is right or this is wrong if there's no objective truth, right? It's like, I would even go as far to say that there's no way to say that slavery or rape or oppressing women are wrong if there's no objective truth.
That's what I was going to say. What does that have to do with truth if it has to do with harming someone else?
So objective statement, truth, it's bad to harm people, right?
Again?
So we can agree that it's an objective truth that harming people is bad?
Not always, but...
Right, because there are circumstances like torture. But
no, but I'm saying...
For torture, like for information, like a terrorist.
If you feel you're gay when you're really young, if you feel that you're a woman in a boy's body when you're really young, that's your truth.
Feelings,
that's your truth. Mm-hmm. So whether society accepts it or not, it does affect you, but that doesn't make it untrue. So when it comes to slavery, at the time for society, it was truth. It was a natural thing, but it was harming people.
Mm-hmm. So I agree, and that's why they were objectively wrong.
Right. So that doesn't make it true. That's why I'm confused when you keep saying the truth. Who is truth?
I think what we're wrestling with is finding out what that objective line is.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with truth.
I think it does. I just don't think that we know what it is.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's very simple. As long as it doesn't harm anyone else, that truth is okay. Go with it. That's what I say. It doesn't harm human beings or property. Your truth is awesome. I'll support it. If it, and I'm not saying harming like only physically, if it even bothers or bugs someone else, then your truth is, something's wrong with your truth. But if it doesn't affect other humans or property, your truth is awesome. But
we spoke before that in certain circumstances, harm to an extent can be a good thing, and that in other circumstances, harm is necessary to prevent further harm.
No, we were talking about natural harm, like falling, like from your choices, not by someone else. So being raped by your uncle,
torturing someone to prevent torturing someone to find out a terrorist plot. I don't know. Like there are circumstances where you torture someone. I don't want to exceptions make bad law, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far. Let's talk in general.
Right.
I think that that as a society we have a negotiation where we're figuring out what is the best structure for us to live by.
I wish it was like that.
Well, yeah, let's say in
society
theory,
is me. It's not us. That's the problem in society.
I'd say that's more of that individualistic way is more and more a modern problem,
right,
than it has been. But yes, I'm with you. But let's say kind of in principle what you would like it to be. It's a negotiation to figure out the best way to live for as many people as possible to flourish. Okay, and then from that point you decide, okay, is religion a good idea? I mean, is having an open approach to sexuality a good idea? And I think that like the question of transgenderism, whether being completely open to the idea, for me, I'm conflicted on the matter. I find it. I'm ambiguous as to, like, especially when it comes to people who are, let's say, teenagers and still figuring out their own sexuality and things like that, to not be strong with the idea of kind of seeing it as just wrong. That, like, if someone were to come to you and say, you know, your son comes to you and he's like, Dad, I'm a girl. You're like, yeah, sure you are. I mean, I feel like it's like, no, you're not. You're a boy. And if that was
if you were in that situation, then what would you say if you have a boy, a 7-year-old, who comes up to you and tells you that, Dad, I'm a girl?
I would insist upon the fact that your son or my son was a boy, and if that was an ongoing,
you would insist, like, by telling him, like,
you're not a girl, you're a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that were to kind of really ongoing, continue, recurring up to a point, I'd be like, okay, now
it wouldn't, because he would shut him down right there and then.
Yeah,
he would tell that to his friends and not his dad.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
that's
know.
What would happen.
I don't know if that like would necessarily tell his friends, but I do accept that there's a possibility that I'm denying his reality.
Right.
But I do think that it's, I'm like if I'm honest about how I would respond to the situation, I think I would shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's born out of this.
And you think it's good? Like the parents that do react that way, you think it's a good thing? Like,
I think
to let their child, okay, shut it down. Maybe when he's older, he'll be a boy and realize it's just a phase. I
think it's, for me, I'm picturing the worst situation that someone were to build upon this idea that they're a girl when they're born a boy, that they're a girl, and then that there would be this kind of regret or remorse for taking hormones or for going through with an operation. Or
I told you, as a child, I would be against it. I wouldn't support it. I wouldn't allow it.
But puberty, so you're against puberty blockers, for example? Because then if your son were to think that he's a girl,
mm-hmm.
then the more testosterone that floods through his veins during his teenage years, the further away he feels from his reality.
Right. So, again, now it's a very complex situation where we can't, come up with a conclusion in a couple of words. But when I say I'd support it, it's not only by just saying, like, I'm with you, whatever you feel. When I say I'm going to support it, I'll probably take him to counseling. And when I take him to counseling, I'll make sure he knows it's not because something is wrong with him. It's only because I want to make sure that that's really what he feels, that it's not something that's going to pass.
Mm.
Do you understand what I mean? I would support it. We would go through a process together, and I'd be like, I just want to make sure that it's not, that you're not just confused. And if, I would take him to therapy, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, if he would want to wear girls' clothing at home or whatever, I would totally support it. But when it comes, I don't even know if there are many therapists that are educated enough or know how to handle when it comes to children with transsexual.
Yeah, I think it's unprecedented. I mean, it's not completely. I mean, there's stories from very, very old, ancient stories of people being transgender.
But I think the most important thing in the world to give a child is to show them that there's nothing wrong with you. I think that's important. Versus to have them shut it down and hide it specifically from the parents, because we all know parents are always not capable of accepting extreme or different things when it comes to their children. But if it's drugs, if it's whatever.
My issue is that I think that's a bit black and white. I think that, so let's say, for example, if your son were to come to you and tell you that he believes in God or, that kind of thing, you would tell him that he's wrong.
No.
Or you wouldn't?
No.
Okay.
To this day, he tells, because he knows I'm His mom makes sure. She makes sure to let him know that his dad is an atheist and doesn't believe in God. So he asked me a few times, how come you don't believe in God? And I told him, it's science, it's evidence, and I used to believe. And he's like, well, I believe in God and I love God. And I'm like, that's fine. That's your choice. If that's what you want, I just want you to know that there's another option. If you don't believe in God, there's nothing wrong with it.
But what if something he believes in is not factual?
It doesn't matter.
He believes the world's flat. You're not going to tell him he's wrong.
Yeah, of course I will.
But
of course I will, because that's wrong. It's like saying your kid is telling you it's daytime now, and it's not.
Maybe our perception is wrong. Maybe the world is actually flat, and we see the world.
That's a discussion I would have with my kid. I would tell him why I believe that, but I still love you for believing that the Earth is flat and there's a spaghetti monster flowing above us, and whatever you believe in, I'm with you, son. But it sounds stupid, and there's no evidence, and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? But I believe that once, I think maybe because when it comes to that, I was raised, I don't know, when it comes to religion, but when it comes to being an actor or this or that, I was always shunned down. My parents told me, keep dreaming, you're living in La La Land. Mm-hmm. I never had support when it comes to that, to being an artist. But when it comes to religion, when it comes to sexuality, swinging, my mom knew everything about me. And they were like, that's wrong. I don't believe in that. I believe in monogamy, blah, blah, blah. But it's... Mm-hmm. So maybe because I was raised like that, the freedom that I can share with my parents anything and everything, that meant everything for me. And that allowed me to explore weird thoughts that I had in my head. Does that make sense? Versus shutting it down and saying, oh my God, my dad's going to kill me. My mom's going to say this. My mom's going to think I'm crazy. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It totally makes sense. I think that I struggle with this relativist idea because, let's say, for example, so you are a law enforcement officer, mm-hmm. and that's based on the premise that people do things right and wrong, right? And I think that I struggle with the idea that there's not like a common understanding between people, that like certain things are right and this is the correct thing to do. And like that, like, and I'm not even saying this in a black and white point of view. Like there's definitely nuance, and to every rule there's an exception, be it self-defense or be it torturing someone to prevent future harm and that kind of thing. But I think that being in a situation where you kind of tell people that whatever reality you experience, your personal truth trumps truth. Okay? And you wouldn't phrase it that way, but trumps kind of the way that everyone else sees it, like mm-hmm. the mainstream understanding of whatever it might be. I think that there's something really wrong with that. I mean, if you come across a tribe that, I don't know, cannibalism was a ritual practice and they're like, leave us alone. I mean, we've been eating humans forever. Like, why? And I think it's like, well, maybe without them being aware of it, there is something objectively wrong with you eating people. Like, and they could never comprehend that. That's right. Not part of their cognition.
But we're going again to harming others and not harming others. For me, that's where the line is. If it's anything you come up with, if it does not harm property or other humans, go with it. So yeah, you brought up good examples of like cannibalism or whatever. Like if my son comes up to me and says, I have these urges of stealing and beating up people, I'd be like, something's fucking wrong with you. Let's go to therapy. You're fucking crazy, whatever.
But where's the line? What about having sex with animals?
It's, I could say it's harming animals, even though we don't know, but that to me is enough because we don't know. I mean, because how do you know? Like, if a human being is having sex with an animal, we don't know if it harms the animal.
Well,
now, if
eat them.
That's not harming them. That's killing them. There's a difference.
So why is cannibalism wrong?
Hmm?
Why is cannibalism wrong?
Ooh, we're going deep in the rabbit hole. Yeah. Yeah, you got me there. And I'm always like, I always say, like, one thing that I don't like about humans that we think that we're better than animals, that we're better than plants or whatever.
Got
like,
a vegan, a potential vegan there.
No, I would have become a vegan if I could. I love meat too much, but yeah.
Oh, just you wait.
I'm against that.
Technology's on the way.
Yeah.
Making it out of
yeah, right.
in the lab.
Steaks in labs or whatever. Yeah, you got me there. I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know about cannibalism and animals. What do you guys think? Shit, how do I get out of this one?
Let's lighten the mood. Let's show. We've got this this gender clip, right?
All right, yeah. Let's change the subject a bit.
Oh, it's still related. Don't worry. We'll get.
Oh, right. Yeah, it is in the subject. So Adam sent me this fucking hilarious clip of. The title of the clip is ESL students learn new gender pronouns. It's fucking hilarious. Do you want to say anything before we play it?
I think that because gender pronouns are really closely related to what we were just saying about how if you are open to a relativist worldview, then the world can be interpreted in infinite ways. And I think that gender pronouns are part of that. And I think that, as English teachers, we
saw that's just so funny. This is just, to me, it just shows the stupidity of where we're headed, the stupidity of society with all like, they don't want to offend, of not offending or, the ones that get offended. Mm-hmm. That's where it leads to, that level of stupidity. And you know what? As you listen to it, we're gonna. It's a video, so we're gonna play the YouTube video. But as you listen to it, as funny as it is, I want you to like look at it from a serious point of view as well. Like how sad it is that this is where we're headed with humanity. Don't you think, Adam? Like it's funny, but it's also sad. Like what the fuck? Like what's?
Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah.
DJ PJ, roll that clip.
Roll it. Enjoy it. It's like what is it? 3 minutes.
I swim. You swim. We swim. Very good, everyone. Now, Farhad, do you swim?
I swim.
Everyone, Farhad swims. So, he swims. Good. Now let's conjugate the verb to swim with the other pronouns. She swims. They swim. Zer swims. Z swims. Zai swims. What's wrong?
I don't understand.
That's okay. I don't understand, and that's all right, Louise. So I is the first person pronoun used when you're referring to yourself.
I swim.
Correct.
Yes, I understand pero I don't understand what is that.
Oh, they are all gender-neutral pronouns.
What does that mean?
Gender-neutral pronouns are what you use when you're referring to someone who doesn't want to be referred to by traditional masculine or feminine pronouns, like he or she.
So not a boy, not a girl.
That's right, Yuki.
Is he gay?
No. Well, not necessarily.
My brother, he gay. Is he one of them?
Do you know your brother's preferred pronouns?
I don't know. My family not speak to him.
Okay, cultures are different. It's important when studying and practicing English that you stay sensitive to the pronouns of others.
Not the boy, not the girl.
That's a table, Farhad. It is a table. You see, the table didn't choose its gender. Objects can't do that, but people can. For example, what is Yuki?
Girl?
Well, maybe. We don't want to misgender Yuki.
Yes, I'm a girl.
You could be.
I am.
Yeah, but you could also be someone who was assigned female at birth, but now identifies as non-binary. So we would, in fact, use a gender-neutral pronoun for you, like Z.
What is a sign? Is homework?
No. A sign is how you look on the outside, but how you feel on the inside, that is how we identify.
Identify swim.
Really, Farhad?
I am confused.
You shouldn't be confused, Yuki.
Sorry.
It's really not that hard, you guys. There's only 63 pronouns.
63 pronoun.
Yes, and it's important before speaking to anyone that you ask, what is your preferred gender pronoun?
I have to ask everyone that?
Yes, of course. Louise, what if you accidentally referred to a Z as a za? Wouldn't you be embarrassed?
No?
Of course you would. You should be embarrassed. And you know what else? It's offensive, right?
Right?
And you want to be a gender ally, right?
Right?
You're not learning English to be a bigot, are you?
Okay.
All right. Louise gets it. Okay, so who is still confused?
The shrimps.
Everyone just raised their hand when she asked who's still confused.
Fucking hilarious.
Okay, as English teachers.
That's the first thing I was going to say. As English teachers.
Oh my god.
You should send it in the WhatsApp group for the whole. Did you send it? No. Oh, you did maybe, I think.
I'm not sure.
You sent a video that, forgot her name. Oh?
Yeah.
She asked you about something. You sent it to the group. Was this it?
Okay. Yeah. So, okay.
that was it?
So
Yeah.
you just clocked my memory. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did share this to the group. I'm not sure that anyone actually bothered to open it, but it's that is that is like perfect because it's like why do we even communicate in the first place, right?
Seriously.
What is the purpose of language? And like this idea that like you overthink and overcategorize everything,
Or people being oversensitive about everything.
yeah, like language is a functional thing. Like you use it to like share information.
Yeah.
It's not like, if anything, if free speech is based on anything.
I should get a bit closer to the mic, I think.
So yeah, if it's based on anything, it's being offensive. That is like such a fundamental premise. Free speech is not like about like, you know, talking about daffodils and butterflies, right?
Right.
It exists because it's like gives people the license to be offensive. That's where Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr come
Exactly,
in, right?
yeah.
It's like,
Right.
like damn right.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy to me that people think that they can control language. And
But do you think it's about language or do you think it's about being oversensitive? Because this is specifically about, not to offend a person who is, I don't know, of some sort. Let's label him, and every time we mention that type of personality or that type of person, we're going to refer to that label, the Z swims.
so exactly, I think that this is exactly down the road of that you are enforcing people to behave in a certain way because you don't have faith in people's resilience. You are essentially saying you must address people in this specific way because people don't have that like strong core that they can just deal with it. And so you must respect people by calling them exactly the way that they want to be called.
But who's the cause
Because they can't
of
handle
that?
it.
Who's the cause of this?
Who is the cause of it? It's PC bullshit.
Right. It's the people that get offended that, don't refer to me as queer, refer to me as weir.
So, yes. And
That's the people that we should say, fuck you.
They're using the government.
We have enough labels.
They're using the government to enforce their ideology. So the government are the ones with the guns, right? They're the ones that have the ability to put people into jail, and if they don't, police are gonna come after them with the guns, right? So they're saying, you don't respect me, well, you're breaking the law. Or if you break the law...
Actually, you're too close. I'm sorry. Just keep an eye on. All right. Sorry.
I'm too close.
I'm just trying to keep the audio levels correct.
Just so
That's
everyone
not-
knows, this is my debut podcast appearance.
Yeah. No, up until now you did great until I told you to move closer to the mic and I just ruined it.
Yeah, no,
Guys, give me a fucking break. This is
got
the first guest.
I've got to get this sucker a good distance from my mouth.
No,
but
you're
yeah,
good. I'm just learning to be an interviewer.
Can we have a round of applause for Joe for his interviewing, first time interviewing,
and round of applause for the
I'm breaking my
guest.
PJ,
the best guest,
my podcast virginity.
Yeah.
I am officially part of. I've got this brain seatbelt. Should I take the seatbelt off?
Do you think we needed a brain seatbelt for this one? I think it was that. No,
Yeah,
maybe we had some
PG.
topics.
We had a couple of moments,
But overall, it was Next one,
Pretty
Adam's going to
amicable.
come here. I think I should make him drink more, and we'll blow your mind.
yeah. Look, so this is this is essentially what set off Jordan Peterson's career. So the history behind the gender pronouns is in Canada, in Toronto, the Ontario Human Rights Code. It was the first time that they introduced legislation that would effectively say not only that you can't say something, but that you must say something. It's enforced speech. So it's
about what? Say something.
So, for example, most laws are negative laws, including the Ten Commandments, where they say you can't do this, or, for example, where like you can't deny the Holocaust. Right, is something which like has been kind of not true in America, but in a lot of European countries, I think in Canada also, that Holocaust denial is legal. But
do you agree with that? By the way,
no. I think that free speech is the way forward.
Nice.
I think that you've got to expose yourself. You've got to shine the spotlight on stupid ideas,
right?
And that's the only way for people to. It's really along the same lines, like that people essentially are strong enough to be exposed to a stupid idea and not to be influenced by it and be like,
yeah, that's the price
ridiculous.
of free speech.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you hide people from something, then they kind of have their own secret communities, and the next thing you know, you've got a flat Earth society.
Right.
But it's so he essentially, Peterson was basically saying that I will not use these gender pronouns because I will not be forced by the government to speak in a certain way. And that set
What
off
does it have to do with government, though?
They made it part of the Ontario Human Rights Code. And
Canada. Okay.
Canada, yeah. And they basically, and this is you're overreacting. What are you just gonna? It's not really a serious crime. It's like, well, what if I don't pay the fine?
Right.
It's like, well, actually, okay, if you follow that line of stubbornness down, then that line of thought, yeah, you will eventually be imprisoned.
So is it really illegal in Canada?
It's illegal in the Ontario Human Rights Code. As far as I know, I actually don't know if it passed, but it was definitely proposed to not address a transgender person by their pronoun of choice if they explicitly tell you that I am the or whatever.
That's crazy.
And then if you say I'm he or she or whatever, maybe like
that's crossing the line, but like, bringing the government into it and making stuff illegal when it comes to
it's completely insane. I think it's actually pathetic when people are like, I can't solve this, let's get the government involved, when you're not talking about like a violent crime or something. I mean, like, you could even argue that marriage, right? It's kind of, it's always funny. It's like, I love you, let's get the government involved.
Yeah.
like it's
I don't know, it opens doors to, I'm just like, again, being the devil's advocate. I'm against marriage. I want to sue I don't know, monogamy. I want to make
monogamy,
or
what do you? How you gonna?
I'm thinking like in Canada's terms, like, okay, if calling a transsexual woman a he is illegal, so what about me who doesn't believe in monogamy, and I'm get offended when people say that that's the right way?
Yes, except the bravest thing to do is to live by your own standard and to live by your own principles, and not to stoop down to other people.
Absolutely, but for me, I'm just shocked to hear that actually in Canada that they made it like illegal. Like,
like
the government stepped in. That sounds to me like
I think it's actually really like something
dictatorship type of thing.
It's something that I often don't know how to behave in certain situations where, let's say you tell someone a principle and they don't play by those rules. Do you fight them at their level, or do you stay at your level? So if somebody sues you and you don't believe it in principle, do you sue them back? Or do you, and it's a really difficult situation. I mean, so, for example, like I'm currently dealing with a situation at work where like I think that I've been put in a situation where it's essentially, I think that I've been put in the situation because like the people who are like above me have decided to be non-confrontational and then have been selectively confrontational in a certain point. And like, we're like, I don't know, let's say, for example, I told like during a discussion was like, please don't interrupt me. So then after that principle was put forward, if they continue to interrupt me, do I play by their rules and interrupt them too? Or do I try to like kind of like stay with my own moral principle? And it's kind of like, well, it's not always clear what to do. I had a conversation with my, with a friend, my dad actually. And it was about what happens when there is a massacre. And we were talking about basically...
Massacre, you mean like the mass shooting?
Yeah, so we're talking about mass shootings. And we were talking about a situation where the Jewish synagogue in California, of course it's a Jewish synagogue, okay, where the Jewish temple in California got shut up. And I said that like I'd really love it if all the imams in the community came up and they stood up for the Jews and they said like, how a minority should not be kind of massacred like this, and we are hand in hand like this. And my dad was like, hey. And then we said, okay, so then when a Muslim mosque gets shot up, so we should do the same thing.
Yeah.
And my dad wasn't so comfortable with that idea because he realizes, and he's right, that there's a tension between, Jews and Muslims, and that there is clearly an issue of anti-Semitism within Islam, as there is an issue of Islamophobia within Judaism.
Right, yeah.
And perhaps justifiably so on both fronts. But it was kind of like, well, if you would want them to stand up for you, if Jews were massacred, then surely if we have that principle, then regardless of whether they do it or not, if we believe that, then we should stand up for them, even if they don't do it for us.
Right.
That's like being brave and standing by your principles.
Right.
And it reminds me, I listened to Nietzsche Beyond Good and Evil, like on an audiobook, and he said this point, and it was like a point that I didn't really understand until I had that conversation, where he said that people say you should treat your neighbor the way that you want to be treated.
Right.
But that everybody acts like they're the neighbor of their neighbor. Okay. And it's like, that's exactly true. It's just like you have these standards, but when it applies to you, you don't necessarily do it, but you do you do apply it to other people. So and by the way, I actually don't know whether who's kind of right in the situation, if there is a right and wrong in this situation, because maybe if if someone's a lost cause, maybe there is no point. I
think it's simple. I don't know.
Okay.
Again, it's tribalism, but I think if there's harm that's done to any other group, I think it's the right thing to stand up and speak against it, talk against it.
But what if that group don't have necessarily your best interests at heart?
Doesn't matter. The people that were massacred at the mosque with that video.
New Zealand?
You showed me the video. That's the only time I've seen it, which is horrific.
Yeah.
I think everyone doesn't matter which religion background you come from, to stand up and speak against it. And it doesn't matter. Not waiting for the other tribe to reciprocate and talk, wait for something bad that happens to you and wait for the other tribe to stand up and talk. But I'm saying, now that I think of it, I think people from Israel talked about it, politicians or whatnot, against it, and said that it's horrific and it's wrong.
So yes,
They did, right? Yeah.
Not like at length, but yes, it was discussed here. I mean, when I see it as a win-win situation to stand up for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one hand, you are living by your own standards. And on the other hand, you are increasing the chances. At least you're trying, right? It's like what is the downside? Because let's say the
reminded me
worst
something
case
huge.
scenario.
Just remind me DeGrasse Tyson with shootings. Go ahead, if I forget.
Okay, DeGrasse Tyson shootings. The worst case scenario, it's like I tried my best, but they still turned against me despite my best intentions. I did my best.
But here's the thing: you're talking about doing something in order to get something back.
No. You unconditionally do it,
Right?
But in the hope
They fucking hate
in the
me.
hope
This
that it
tribe
would
hates
change
me.
my mind. In the hope that it would change their mind.
No.
And let's say that they say they hate me.
You're looking at the whole thing in
the main reason you do it is for your own reasons. I'm just saying that if you look at it from an external point of view, it's also a win-win situation. The main reason you do it is to stand on your own principles.
right. That's what
the
I'm
main
talking
reason.
about.
That's the main reason.
The only reason. There's no other reason. It's wrong.
Well, it's also
fucking wrong
potentially advantageous
to walk in a I don't care if it's a mosque or a synagogue or a library and kill, or a school and kill innocent people. It's fucking wrong.
But let's be cynical.
Even
and
if
say
this
it's also
tribe hates me.
strategic. It's also. But let's be cynical for a second and say it's also strategic. It not even if that's your intention. It's also potentially reconciliatory. Like if there's any way to prevent, let's say, a clash of civilizations, surely it's by doing stuff like that.
But it's not for any payback.
Okay.
I don't care about whatever happened. I don't care. It's just wrong. I'm just going to stand up and say it's fucking wrong to kill innocent people. Doesn't matter which tribe there are. Even if it's a tribe that hates me and tries to kill me every day, it's fucking wrong. Because those people are not trying to kill me every day. Those people are fucking innocent people that went to mosque to prayer and they got massacred that way. It's just fucking wrong. That I don't know. Sometimes, again, that's why I think at a young age, I came up with the name Planet Joe for a DJ, because I feel like I'm from a different planet.
So
to me, it looks so simple. It's like, why are we even discussing it? Why is it even
because it's not black and white.
It is.
No,
someone harmed innocent people. Doesn't matter. Those innocent people belong to a tribe who hates me. Yeah, hypothetically, right? Like we were talking about the conflict between Muslims and Jews. But it's not those specific people that died that day. They weren't trying to harm me physically every day in front of my.
Do you believe in capital punishment?
No.
Under no circumstances?
No.
Eichmann?
No.
There's no circumstance that somebody deserves.
And let me take you back to the beginning of the pod. You said, we make mistakes, so can it be forgiven? So how about if it's a mass shooting? Would you be able to forgive someone if it's Eichmann was what, 30 years after, 50? I don't even know.
I think it was something like 20, 25 years after.
Yeah. So I strongly believe in, like, I don't know if manipulated is the right word. And there's so much information about that. And it shows in tribes. Like, when, for example, they show a riot and you have like good people, nerds that wouldn't, kill a fly. But because their group is starting to break shit, they're doing the same thing. It's very easy. We were talking about how easy is it to manipulate people, right? When it comes to voting or whatever. I think all of us, deep inside, we have, some of us have a drop, some of us have more than a drop of evilness.
Yeah.
All humans do.
Everyone has capacity for it.
Absolutely. And when you have a whole nation like Germany at the time that rises against a different outside group, Jews at the time, I think it was so easy to manipulate. It was. Children hated Jews at the time. It was all over, like, everywhere, right? So people, for doing such horrific things, I think they had a day when they realized like how fucked up they were. Like they were on a bad trip. Like I fucking killed innocent people. I tortured. Even if they don't regret it, I don't believe in capital punishment.
So,
and sorry that I'm cutting you. I think that life sentence in jail is worse than death. That's why I don't believe in capital. I think it's giving them a discount by killing them.
So, okay.
It's an easy way out.
Okay, so
Another thing.
Processing. 1 second. So the first thing about the German population, about whether they're brainwashed, whether they're victims in the situation or bystanders, I think that's a really impossible question. I think that in principle, I'd like to believe that if I was in the situation, I wouldn't behave in their way, but that's very idealistic of me, and chances are 99% that I would behave in the same way, because it's like takes a lot of chutzpah and a lot of bravery to stand up and risk your own life, like to fight for something you believe in.
Right.
As for Eichmann, just my view on it is it's actually the reason why you would kill someone is not because of what they've done, but the future potential for harm and the precedent you set for other people. And I think that you, as a police officer, would agree that when somebody is a threat and has the potential to harm others, they've essentially deserved capital punishment. I mean, that's why in certain situations you would eliminate the threat, right?
You're good. Okay. Let me process this. Two things. First of all, it's outside manipulation, and it's your whole tribe. And you just reminded me something important that I forgot to bring up when
DeGrasse Tyson.
No,
not that.
But thanks. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
I still don't remember what I was going to say, DeGrasse Tyson. But I forgot to bring up about the law enforcement episode where I talked about things that I disagree with when it comes to personal belief. But as a law enforcement officer, I have to implement that law. For example, it's marijuana. I forgot to talk about that. And it's huge because... I'm so glad you brought it up. So here I can make up for it. I forgot to bring up to tell the listeners, like, they would be shocked how many police officers are against arresting people for marijuana crimes. And I can't tell you how many times me or my other officers or law enforcement officers, when we made a bust of a teenager or someone young who had some marijuana in his pocket, and we, as a law enforcement, you swore oath and you have to enforce the law. No matter if tomorrow they make a law of it's illegal to wear sunglasses, I think it's the stupidest thing in the world. I have two choices: either quit or you have to keep your job and enforce that law.
It's black white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, people and. Why I was so upset that I didn't, that I forgot to bring it up, because I'm sure people would be shocked to hear that. I'd probably say 95% of police officers get pissed off when we find marijuana on someone, on a citizen, on a civilian. We'd be like in the car, we'd be like, that fucking idiot. Couldn't he hide it better? Now I have to fill out all these paperwork. I have to kill a half of shift because of this fucking half a bag of marijuana. But I have to enforce it. So going back to capital punishment, and I talked about in that episode that we're trained to do that if someone threatens and doesn't think. But here's the thing. This is the difference. Over here you have someone who's threatening innocent lives in a civilized community. And over here you're comparing it to Germany, where the whole community is rising against a race.
I don't want to make this individually about Eichmann.
Okay, so
capital punishment can be for a pedophile rapist.
Okay, so Okay, so specifically with Eichmann, my personal beliefs, I don't know, maybe it's been proven before that he's a psychopath. And many other generals, I think, are psychopaths. They don't have empathy. They don't have...
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I don't want to dive into that, I experienced what up close what it's like living with a person who doesn't have empathy. So I still don't think capital punishment is justice. I think it's much more punishing to lock that person up for the rest of his life until he's 90. I think the punishment is harsher than killing him. That's my personal belief. That's the first thing. Second thing, he's a psychopath. There are many psychopaths in that era. And the biggest thing, which a lot of my Jewish and Israeli friends hate me hear from my mouth. They're like, "You're fucking Jewish. How could you say that?" That I think that Hitler was a fucking genius.
Yeah.
He was a genius.
Totally.
He knew how to manipulate. He knew how to lead. He knew how to gather the right psychopaths around him. And it was the perfect storm of so many things.
Look, as a storyteller, as building a narrative, after Germany effectively after World War One, couldn't have hit a lower rock bottom, and the reparations they had to pay and all that. I mean, he effectively rose from the ashes and built a nation
Absolutely.
effectively on a lie.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of...
No, I always say he's a genius, but a genius of hate.
Yeah, he's an evil genius.
Evil genius, yeah. But
I guess, look, my Eric Weinstein is something of, from this whole new world of podcasting, is probably intellectually the guy who I'm just so amazed, impressed, and almost inspired by. And he, along with his brother Brett, talks about this rule of his camp where he talks about presume obvious to be subtle until proven otherwise, and presume wrong to be counterintuitive until proven otherwise. And I think that nuance really applies to these kind of questions that seem black and white, like capital punishment, where I'm very happy to agree with you on principle that you don't bully a bully and you don't kill someone because they killed someone else.
right.
But I do think, like, you know, you hear stories about, let's say, Charles Manson, serial killer, who the longer that he lives, he's like inspires copycat killers. And there's something about him continuing to exist that, like, the guy is not, he's pure evil. And as a result, you've got to eliminate him like a cancer.
Yeah, but going back to your utopia, do you think if we'd kill all the psychopaths and all the killers and they wouldn't, what was the word you say, motivate or inspire other psychopaths to do something, you think serial killers will be eliminated from the planet?
No.
There you go.
I do think that there are not that many serial killers, I'd like to hope.
Right. And you're right.
And I think that there are steps that can be taken. For example, like there's a new policy in news networks when it comes to publicizing a terrorist or after a mass shooting, where now they don't publicize the name anymore.
Right.
So they don't want to glorify the violence.
I love that.
Right.
That's better than capital punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
much more effective. Yeah.
So that's where there's this kind of like this nuance where it's like, okay, like, so for example, in principle, you can be against capital punishment, realize in certain situations it makes sense. You can, and like, okay, like evil is part of the human heart. There's always going to be evil people.
Yep.
We can do all that we can to prevent
Exactly.
copycats and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I don't think that there's anything that's black and white apart from the fact that there's nothing that's black and white.
Right.
That's like the only black and white thing that I can think of.
Right.
And it's like, I think that it's like, I almost see it as kind of like, I almost see like kind of our lives as like this kind of adventure where we're just kind of like figuring stuff out. But the beauty of it is that we're not kind of figuring stuff out externally. We're kind of experiencing stuff externally to kind of realize internally where we stand on these things. And the question that always gets to me is like, imagine if like there were like no humans. Like, would this stuff still be true? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it like we're all like you know, you talked about like kind of the maze before.
Like Einstein said, if you don't look at a tree, is it still there?
I think it's I forgot that. Yeah, if the perception, right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, like,
is there sound? Yeah,
is there sound?
Yeah.
I always say that there's a noise but not a sound. I always say that a sound needs to be processed, but a noise is just background. And I've believed some stupid stuff over the course of my life, and the one stupid thing that I think is true is this idea of like a collective psyche. It's this idea of like, well, the moment that something gets processed, it kind of becomes part of like our collective humanity. Like when people talk about like 9/11, I think of it like it's like the collective psyche of America, and that like it's not just an individual thing. Like that there's actually something about the way that our brains are networked and connected to each other that like...
I don't know.
Too
Specifically on that, it's
too much pseudoscience.
No, not that. I'm saying it's just a sensitive thing that I'm kind of like frustrated with, because I was there, not in New York, but I was in America, and I felt when it happened how what's the word? Yeah, I think I'm overbuzzed.
Like shocked, surprised,
when
united.
All united.
Okay.
So if I miss the word united, that means I'm buzzed.
It's part of the It's part of the country, right?
Right.
It's like the you part of it.
Yeah, I think I'm done.
The divided states of America, the DSA. Welcome.
Yeah, how united it you felt it in the air, like, you know, like all over the place. Always we have the American flag flying all over the place, but I don't know, you felt it in the air, like people, like you just wanted to hug people in the streets, and you felt it. People were so kind and nice to each other. It was like,
where were you at that point? Which city were you?
I was in LA at the where was it? A theater academy at the time. I remember like we were rehearsing for a play, and one of the students walked in, and it's like, oh, a plane just crashed into one of the towers. And
people say that the most important day in America in the past 20 years in terms of its impact was not September 11th, but September 12th.
The day
like
after.
the way that people united the country.
Yeah.
And
that's the only time where a few years after, when I realized, because I've heard this saying before, that war is good when it comes to uniting societies. War is good.
Common enemy,
Yeah. And that's the only time, I don't know, 6-7 years after, when I realized like people did forget. And the greatest example I have for you and for the audience is, again, I forgot, Daily Show.
You talking about Jon Stewart?
Jon Stewart. Yeah, what the fuck is wrong with me? I'm going blank with names and
it's not like
words.
We're nearly 4 hours in or anything.
Right. But yeah, I'm sure many of you, and you heard the Jon Stewart speech he gave to Congress about the... And when I watched that, I was like, fuck, if I ever see Never Forget on Facebook for 9/11, I'm going to fucking spit on the screen, because people did forget compared to how united we were, and how like, we'll never forget, we're together with blah, blah, blah. Time passes, it's gone. So going back to your connectivity that you're talking about, not pseudoscience, but it's bullshit, because people do forget. people do move on, and look at us now. 50% of the country is left and right, and we fucking hate each other, and there's race and all that shit. A year after September 11, you wouldn't feel anything like that. Doesn't matter black, white, brown, left, right. We're Americans. We love each other. We're in this together.
So let's say you're talking about positively. Let's talk about negatively for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think that 9/11 or slavery or World War II or World War I for that matter had a collective impact on the psyche of the nation? That like there's something in this narrative, this like fiction that you have with other people where like, let's say for example, you all believe in the same country, where like negatively there's like this collective trauma that like everyone is a part of it. Never mind the united part for a moment. Like, let's say the divide in America.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that the trauma of slavery is not just on like an individual level? There's like this kind of collective basis that like there's this like kind of injustice that has like it's like in the conscience of the nation.
Well, that's because it's continuous. When it comes to slavery, when it comes to racism, it's continuous. But I'm kind of like 50-50 on that because, you know, specifically in LA and in Vegas, I didn't feel racism at all. But in LA, because I had many close friends and I had many... I don't think I ever mentioned that I managed a restaurant in Beverly Hills for 7 years. The
restaurant, I don't know.
The Barry's place.
I always forget, what do you call it when you were a cop and the ladies like the cops?
Badge bunnies.
Badge bunnies.
The badge bunnies.
Sorry, restaurant manager. There's calamari hunters. Yeah.
No, yeah. So 2 things that I enjoyed at the time. 7 years. It was the longest job I've had. I was a general manager at a restaurant in Beverly Hills. It was a celebrity hangout.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess we'll leave that for different discussions about all the models that I've been with. And it sounds
2 out of 3 of the.
It sounds glorious, but that's another thing that on my sex episode that I forgot to mention that I was like, I forgot to talk about that.
You're gonna make a whole series.
That I wanted to talk about like beautiful women. I've slept with so many beautiful women, and it means nothing when it comes to being good at bed and sexual
quality over quantity kind of thing.
No. It's
what do you mean that doesn't make a difference?
No, people are going to say I generalize, but the prettier the women are, the worse they are in bed. Sorry, pretty women.
They don't have to try as hard. The world comes to them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm telling you, I've been with like tens like at that restaurant, like, and I'm sure many of them slept with me for other reasons, but
yeah, you're
because I was close to celebs and I knew people in Hollywood, but still. Anyways, we're just going off topic. I forgot what I was going to say.
That was a topic?
Oh, no. So I was going to say, like, I connected with not only celebs, but I had, like, really close friends that were African-American. Mm-hmm. And I hung out with it's not the type of, you know how many people say, just to show that I'm not racist, I have black friends. Like, I hung out, like, at their home. Like, we were friends, like, seriously. And many times I found myself as the only white person in a black party, you know, in Beverly Hills or mansion where...
Yeah, the token white guy, yeah.
Like, seriously, like you'll find 1 or 2, 3 white people in there. And I'm... From the 2.5 listeners that I have, I might get some backlash from this. No, but I'm saying I was shocked to realize that the racism that comes from the black community against the whites, the shit they talk about white people, white people, like I remember like over time that I was like, holy shit, like these people are so racist. So going back to saying like sometimes when you said it's about the trauma or whatever, I remember telling myself like, yeah, that they, you know, we have a lot to be ashamed for, you know, the slavery and like that's why they're, And then I was like, no, these are young people who own mansions in Beverly Hills and have a good life. Like, why do they? So that brings me back to what we were talking about, you know, forgiving Eichmann or people who did horrific things. That's when I was angry with the black community. That was like, okay, enough time passed. Like, you're the third generation. Yeah, your grandparents suffered. Yeah, we should be ashamed of it. And it's time to move on. You can become a president now if you want. You can become a business owner, a celebrity. It's open. There's no racism, unless it's from your side or whatever.
I think it's one of these situations where, let's say that there is racism. It's like, how do you want to deal with that? Like, how do you want to approach it?
But there is. That's the thing. That I'm saying this was, I don't know, 20 years ago. But there is racism from both sides, and
absolutely. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, like, there's given that there's a reality that, for example, there is racism, there is discrimination. It's like, okay, like, I'm with you, and I'm very happy to accept that I may be privileged in this regard or that regard, and maybe that, like, that there are certain aspects that are unfair about life.
Right.
It's like, what are you going to do about it? And maybe, you know, people can call me out and say, it's easy for you to say that. But it's like, okay, but, like, let's not make this about me for a second. Like, well, like, how do you want to deal with this situation? Like, what do you want to do about it? So I think that the resentment, you know, there's this Buddhist, there's this Buddhist kind of thought experiment, let's say, comparing holding on to hatred from the past, like holding on to a hot stone and waiting for the pain to stop. And it's like, you're just hurting yourself.
Right.
As in, like, that it's such a... There are these kind of, it's all about interpretation. You know, it's just, it's like the fact that you hold on to pain from the past, all you're saying is that your past is more powerful than your present.
Right.
Like, you want to be the hero of your own story. Yeah. You want to do something about it.
Right.
Or you want to kind of, for the rest of your life, I mean, talk about this collective psyche, Jews in the Holocaust. Definitely, you could even say it's black and white. Two types of people survived the Holocaust. Those that were stuck there for the rest of their lives and never got over it. Those that moved on and built their own lives.
Right.
And it's just like, you know, what are you going to do with this horrible information? Are you going to, like, confront it? I wouldn't say be at peace with it, but confront it. There's this parable of the three bricklayers. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, where there's three bricklayers. They ask the first guy, what do you do? He's like, you know, I pick up bricks and that's pretty much it. And they ask the next guy, what do you do? He's like, well, I pick up bricks and, you know, I build walls. They ask the last guy, they're like, what do you do? He's like, well, I build a cathedral. It's like, are you going to look at the big picture here and realize that your actions now can really make a huge impact on your life if you see the big picture?
Exactly.
Or are you going to, like, carry on just, like, acting like you're building the brick and telling a story about what happened in your past?
Right.
And I think that it's like, if there's anything that's kind of the crux of this matter, it's like, are you looking back or are you looking forward?
Right.
Are you using the past to know where you came from, to know where you're going?
Exactly.
Or do you define yourself by your history?
Right. And that's what I meant when I said, when it comes to the black community in America, that it's continuous. That's why I understand why there's still the resentment. Because the slavery, but they are still, most of them, the majority, and especially as a police officer who was in those poor communities where the majority of crime is, and, you know, as I mentioned before, every time I pulled someone over, if it's an African American person, my heart rate went up. It's almost for sure it's trouble. It's not because I'm racist. It's because those are the statistics. But those statistics are not because they're bad people or they like to be criminals. It's because the situations that they're in, those poor communities, that I would probably become a criminal if I would have that life. If I couldn't feed my children, I would sell drugs. I would do whatever it takes to pay rent, to have electricity. And I've seen those neighborhoods. And I've seen those children that hated me like they would cut my throat with a knife if they had the opportunity. A 10-year-old. They had so much hate for the police. And it's because his dad is in prison, but for him, it's you're to blame. You know, you're the person with the badge. You took my dad to prison. It's not the big picture. So it's a double-edged sword.
It's a double-edged sword, but I think that there's one thing that can be concluded from it, which is that if you point the finger at others, you're going to go nowhere.
Exactly.
And it's like, you know, Ayn Rand, you know, she wrote like Atlas Shrugged. Okay, like, is this concept of selfishness, this nuanced idea of selfishness, where it's like, be selfish in a way that you know that you want to be your best self. Realize, be a friend to your future self, and like know that if you treat people in the right way, and you don't live in the past, you're being your best self, and you're being selfish, and like let's say as opposed to egotistical, you are fulfilling your potential. The longer that you, perhaps justifiably, point the finger at people who have held you down, you will live with that for the rest of your life, and you'll take that to the grave.
Yeah.
You know, you can hold grudges and you can hold on to negativity and all that seemingly justifiable stuff, and you can be right.
Yeah.
And you'll be right and miserable,
exactly,
and you'll die that way.
And that's where it comes to generational thing, and that's why I think parenting is so important. That's why I say with the conflict that you know there's in Israel between Muslims and Israelis, because as parents they raise their children to hate. You know,
I totally get it.
The ones that I've noticed as a police officer. As a police force in a community, the ones that actually came out of the whole cycle of violence, specifically between police and the black community, it's the parents that realize what you just did. If I'm going to hate and continue hating and teaching my children to hate, it's going to hurt me. And if I'm going to change that perspective and trying to open up and saying hello to a police officer and inviting him to my house and showing my child that he's a good person, that he's here to help us and protect us, then you're starting to see the change.
Yeah, and there are these really counterintuitive ideals. One is Buddhist and the other one is about blood is thicker than water. So blood is thicker than water is one of these expressions that sometimes gets misunderstood because the full expression, something along the lines of, may not be word for word, that blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb. Meaning that there are circumstances where the bond that you make with yourself, with other people, with certain ideals are sometimes stronger than what may be fed to you because of your past, your parents, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And Buddhism is similar concept, that like the idea of family and all that kind of stuff and what's happened to you and doesn't define who you are. And there are even some like Buddhist ideas where they will talk about that actually this idea of my family is like wrong. It's like the wrong way to look at the world. Like you are a part of something bigger, And the only way to be present is to kind of, not necessarily to cut ties with your family. It's never anything with Buddhism is that black and white. It's always kind of this mesh of gray, but it's kind of like that, like you've got the circumstances of your life, and there's like the way that your parents may think of the world and all that. And it's like, you know what? You are your own person. You can think for yourself.
Right.
And I cannot even imagine how difficult it must be to be someone born, I don't know, in Gaza, or, you know, under the, like the Son of Hamas story, where you've got to literally risk your life to go against being fed this diet of hate. And I mean, that's, it's impossible for me to imagine. I'm sure that if I was in the situation, I wouldn't necessarily have the balls to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I just, I don't know. I think it's like one of these situations where, I don't know, for example, we talk about this ongoing thing. I think that Palestinians are the only group who pass refugee status onto their children by definition. So that, like, no matter where they're born, their children get refugee status.
Yeah.
And I have, honestly, like, I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to be born as a Palestinian.
Right.
I can't imagine how difficult it must be to kind of just have to deal with the reality of what the current situation is. And like, I have like all the empathy in the world, and I'm very open to the idea that if I was born in Gaza, I might even join Hamas.
Absolutely. I said
Like,
that more than once, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like
When you got nothing to lose, and
I've got no hope for my future. Like, I've joined the resistance, but I do think that it's.
I specifically with that, I was there as a soldier in paratroopers in Gaza. Back then, we were, some people say, I guess, occupying. But not really. It was before it was separated and boarded and closed. They were open. They had jobs in Israel and whatnot. But it was only certain groups of people, you know, on their, we had like a wanted list of specific people. The majority of Gazans were, honestly, I've seen mothers that were like my mother. And one time I got a Sabbath, a weekend. And the Israeli army is like, if you do something wrong, you stay a weekend, you don't get to go home.
That's our punishment.
Yeah, it's a punishment. So it's like Shabbat Shev. It means like Saturday sit. You're staying Saturday.
Shabbat
but
motherfucker.
I've did so many of them because I fucked up. Most of them smoking while on guard. But quite a few times, more than once, we're not supposed to take like food or, you know, gifts from the people like in Gaza because they can poison you, or it's, I guess it's a security thing. But being there for, I don't know, I think it was 5 months, you get to know the people, you get to know the mechanic, you get to know the mothers in the neighborhood, you get to know those people. And I'm talking early 90s. I don't know. Now I think probably 99% they have hate. If they see a soldier, they would want to cut him to pieces, an Israeli soldier. But back then it wasn't as bad because they had their husbands work in Israel and Tel Aviv. It was much easier. They can go out of Gaza. The hate wasn't as bad, even though you felt it in the air. But so that's the first time I had a conflict with my fellow brethrens in the unit, that I was a leftist, because I used to talk to them, to the kids, you know. So one time I got a Sabbath and almost went to prison because I let an American, I'm saying, an Gazan Arab child touch my rifle, which is the biggest no-no. Like, I took the strap off my neck and I let him hold it like that. He could have ran with it. That's
could have killed you, bro.
Right? Yeah. No, it wasn't loaded. I had the magazine on me. It was, but still, I was like, you know, I don't know, communicating with him. And I felt that I made a difference to show them that, we're humans as you are. We can be lovely. And that's my state of mind. We can get along. Why can't we all get along? But there was one kid that I really connected with, Muhammad. It was, 10, 11 at the time. And his mother, and every time she made me some food, I snuck it, without my lieutenant seeing. But a couple times he saw, and I stayed the weekend because of that. But I remember one time, I didn't see him for a couple weeks. Muhammad, I was like, I asked his mother. She went into the house, didn't talk to me, closed the door. It felt like something's going on in the air. And then one time he got attacked with, again, what do you call the bottles?
You mean the cocktails?
Yeah, the
Motolov. No, Molotov. Right?
The fire bottles, whatever.
Guys, excuse us. I think it's Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
But
anyways, we got attacked with that and rocks and whatever. We chased a bunch of people and we caught a few of them. Me and my friend chased the kid. We caught him, and it was Muhammad, the guy that I was so connected with, and I felt that I made a difference, whatever. But this was after like a month that I haven't seen him, and I remember when we put the zip ties on his arms behind his back, I turned him around, and his whole face was stitched up. He was cut up, like his face was cut up in pieces. And I was like, what the fuck, Muhammad? Like, first of all, why are you with these guys? Because there were groups like Israeli haters, and the majority were like to just want to live a good life. So he started crying. He said his brother with the top of a can cut up his face because he's talking to Israeli soldiers. And he's like, this is all because of you guys, and I wish you'd die, and blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget this in my life. I started crying with Muhammad, and Danny Benita was a good friend of mine who was extreme right, like hated Arabs and Gazans or whatever. Grabbed me when he saw me crying and holding him, and fucking, I connected with that kid. It's just fucking, and grabbed me and threw me to the side, and it was a whole scene. But that's when I realized the hate that they have inside, how contagious it is. And also I realized the way Danny Benita, I don't know if I should give more details about it, but he behaved not nicely to the kid that we caught and the others. And I don't know, there were so many moments I was like, I understand why they hate us. And they're in the wrong, we're in the wrong, but it's an endless cycle, and unless parents are going to start and teachers are going to start educating towards peace. But nowadays, I'm talking about, 25 years after, I think it's hopeless. I don't think it'll ever end when it comes to...
So, as humans, we love stories, right? And there's this like narrative structure to our lives, and we like inherit these narratives. And it's not just about religion, right? Like we inherit these stories, like we inherit our parents' stories and our culture, and we inherit all this stuff. And I never know how you get people not to go along with a narrative that is destructive, or any narrative for that matter. I mean, this is kind of a weird segue, but do you believe in free will?
Yes and no. Sam Harris kind of put me on the fence on that.
Because if free will doesn't exist, and it is quite a common position nowadays that free will, like scientific position, that free will doesn't exist. It's like you can't even like what hope is there for someone that is fed a diet of all this information, which basically is confirmation bias for their existing narrative, and in your situation with Muhammad, where this guy is like kind of literally threatened and physically abused to conform to his narrative,
Right.
and it's like, well, you know, if we don't even have a choice in the matter, it's like, what hope does it have,
Right.
to kind of resolve disputes that have been going on for hundreds of thousands of years?
Hence nihilism. Ta-da!
Yeah. Okay.
That's
But
when
for
I'm like,
everyone
there's
else.
no fucking hope. Everything is meaningless.
I don't look. I guess that the funny thing about society is like free will is everything.
Right.
It's everything. And to conclude that free will is not true is to change the whole structure of society. For example, crime. How can you say that someone's a criminal when they didn't have a choice in the matter? You can say that they need rehab.
No.
You can say that they need to be kind of secluded because, like, to protect other people.
No,
You
that's
can't
a great example.
You can't say they're responsible for their crime.
It's a great example of what I was talking about, that they have no choice. Society shunned them. They live in a shitty neighborhood. They can't pay electricity, and they become criminals. They had no choice.
So that's where I don't. That's where I don't agree.
You don't?
I don't. I totally understand and am empathetic to people's circumstances leading them down certain roads in life.
No, don't get me wrong. Of course, they can
I
get a
think they
job
had
at
a
McDonald's and
choice.
they can dig themselves out of it. But you got to think deeper. The psychology of a child who's raised in such a neighborhood when his mother is working 2 jobs and trying to feed them, and his father is selling drugs in order to feed them, and because of that, he's in prison. And they don't have heating in winter, and they don't have air conditioning in the summer. It fucks up with the person who grows up, first of all. Second of all, for them to look for meaning or to find something, it's drugs. That high, they can't find it anywhere else.
It's escapism, yeah.
Yeah, where normal people do that when they go to a movie or a play or a nightclub and get laid, and they have that action in their teen years where they let it out. They let their fucking punk rock, whatever. You know what I mean?
I know
Those
what you
communities
mean.
don't have that, and the frustration starts at age 0. And it's a community. Now, don't get me wrong. From those communities, you have people, and I've seen that. I've seen many. I'm talking about those crime-infested, poor communities. Many men and women that stayed away from it. But I've seen how hard it was for them to go to
incredibly
McDonald's and work doubles for $7 an hour in order to feed their children, where they have a drug dealer that tells them, listen, make this deal for me, you get $2,000. You work 2 months for that. How hard it is for a man to say, no, man, I don't want to do crime.
So it sounds nigh on impossible.
Exactly.
It genuinely does.
That's what I mean. In reality, if I was in that neighborhood, I would fucking probably rob and do drugs I would look for the easy way out. I'm like, fuck it.
I just want to
Life
emphasize,
sucks. Fuck this.
Yes. I just want to emphasize the probably. I just want to emphasize it is a probably. And that, like, the moment that you get to a point where you don't give people agency, where you say, like, even if it's the most difficult thing in the world, you still have a choice. And this applies also to what we were talking about before, be it poverty-stricken neighborhoods, be it Nazi Germany, be it all that. Like, the moment that you tell people you didn't have a choice, it's like, I don't buy it. Like, and it's so,
I agree,
it's so
but I think
rich
it's
for
a
me.
cop-out.
It's so rich for me to say it.
I think it's a cop-out
because
to
it's
say.
like rich, like in both senses of the word. Like it's like, it's so, just almost ridiculous for me to kind of, to say it, because I'm making all these presumptions about the options that someone might have when maybe they literally have, they don't have that option. But I just, the moment that I were to surrender the idea that free will, is an illusion. That's the moment that I don't like. There's this kind of thing about accountability that I think it gets lost along the way, and it's just kind of like, and then it kind of comes a game of, okay, who's oppressing who, and who's oppressed, and it's like, well, 1 second, it's like, despite all of that, you can still rise above it.
But it's so fucking difficult that it's so easy. I'm saying it's easy. It's easy to talk, but it's not as easy to walk the walk.
Yeah,
of course, anyone can make a choice, but it's much harder to actually do it.
But they can't if free will doesn't exist. As in, okay, so there's this.
No, so let's talk about free will for a second. To a certain extent, it doesn't exist. And I'll give you an example, and this is where Sam Harris, he's fucking brilliant, as we know.
Yeah, genius,
but when he talked about, have you seen that speech he gave about free speech? I think it was...
I follow him very
where he talked
closely,
about,
so,
like,
yeah.
he told the audience, I want you to think of a certain city in a certain country.
Okay. Yeah.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, I guarantee you not many people thought of Zimbabwe, for example. Mm-hmm. You had the choice to think of Zimbabwe, but you thought of France, of New York, you thought of bigger cities.
Okay.
Because the choices weren't there. Like, I can't remember, and I don't want to butcher what he was talking about, but he said to a certain extent, and I'll give you an example from my experience when we're talking about poor neighborhoods. Yeah, a teenager or a child in a poor neighborhood has the choice. He can work hard, save money, move to France or Canada and go to college and become a doctor. He has that choice. But it's not even in his sphere of thought.
He doesn't even
That's where Sam Harris says we don't have the choice. It's like our surroundings make the choices for us, because I'm thinking of, how do I get food? And the most urgent and quickest way is to rob an old lady and then go feed my family.
But he goes beyond that. So he basically thinks that everything is brain damage. Okay? What do I mean by that? He uses the example of where, let's say, someone is a killer and doesn't know why he kills. And he's like some like crazy psychopath. And then let's say he gets killed, they do an autopsy, they find there's like a tumor in his head that literally is pressing on whatever part of the brain is responsible for empathy. And this tumor has made this person act and behave in this way. And he says that he basically applies that logic to everything. You have no choice but to act the way you act. To look back on a decision and to think I could have acted otherwise is just wrong. In that moment, because of the state of the universe and your brain and your experiences and everything that happened to you in that moment, you had no choice but to act in the way that you acted. And that's where I kind of retort and kind of be like, no, I don't agree. I don't agree that you are what happened to you. And I don't agree that you couldn't have chosen otherwise. Now, I get the point that, like, say, choose a city, and it's like it just kind of emerges out of consciousness. Like, it's like, you know, like as if you kind of take some kind of control over your decision, but you're like just you're just like jumping on the bandwagon of this thought. Like, you're not responsible for it. Kind of came out of nowhere.
That's what he was talking about, yeah.
So there's another guy called Dan Dennett, who's also...
Love Dan Dennett.
Yeah, yes. And he's a compatibilist. And a compatibilist is essentially somebody who believes in free will, but believes in free will in the sense of the feeling of free will. So this is where him and Sam Harris will differ. So there's kind of two ways to think about free will. One way is to think of it scientifically, about the atoms and the state of the universe and the neurotransmitters in your brain and all that kind of stuff. And if you think along those lines, like mathematically, scientifically, maybe you're right. There is no other way that you could have acted.
Yeah.
And if you think of it from the other point of view, it's like your experience of what happened. It's like effectively you had conscious control. So that is what we call free will, like this conscious control. So Sam Harris would be like, that's a cop out, because if you like scan MRI scans, like maybe we don't have the technology to do it properly yet, but like you'll see that the brain actually decides like a few seconds before,
right? Yeah,
like you even decided, and so you're consciously aware in this moment, but your brain activity happened at this moment, which is further proof. And it's like, well, okay, but like then let's look at other stuff like reflexes and stuff like that.
I think that's been proven though, that the brain,
for very
makes
simple
a choice
activities
before you're conscious.
Yeah, for very, very simple,
Yeah.
non-complex
Right,
activities, it's like I press my left hand on my right hand.
Right, yeah.
Yes. But like the point is that like if anything, I'm happy to accept the scientific thing, which is that the state of the universe and the atoms and all that kind of stuff, I couldn't have acted otherwise. But from a compatibilist point of view, my experience of what happens, I did have conscious control. And this is where I'd even go to the point where I would say that even if I'm deluded in having the illusion that I have conscious control, it's useful. And because that's a useful way of looking at the world, then it's like kind of, it's a weird thing, but it's like I'm open to being deluded because I think that I live a better life if I think that I'm in control of my actions. Like,
if you think
in a free sense.
But I think that's when the term "you don't know what you don't know" comes in. It's
but what, like you've not got enough life to kind of act like everything's in darkness. Do you know what I mean? Like you gotta fight the things you don't know, the things you know. And the more that you mull on the things that you don't know, I mean, no, you've got to explore and widen your circle and find more things that you
don't know. What you don't know, you can't widen. You can't discover.
But
you can't find.
Yes, you're far
I'm
better
thinking
off.
When it comes to making a choice, we don't have the option of making a choice. It's we don't know what we don't know.
Sure, but let's choose our battles and battles the things that we don't know because of things that we know. And like deal with the circle of ignorance around the things that we know, as opposed to like thinking of all the permutations of the things that we don't know, because that's infinite. That's like, that's endless. I mean, like as in, yeah, you're right. Like, but like, that's like kind of saying, let's not care about the earth because of all this open space out there. It's like, well, no, because we're here. Like, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes people, when they think about what space control, like space travel,
yeah,
the reason why space travel is so important is because of where we are. It's not just for like going out and exploring things we don't know. It's because it's like to learn more about where we are.
Right. Which just reminds me,
like why you travel. Right?
Every time I see like we got to save the planet thingy,
save the whales.
No, just save the planet when it comes to climate change. You know, we got to save the planet. It makes me laugh because it's like the planet doesn't give a fuck about us. The planet's going to survive regardless.
They're going to breathe a huge sigh of relief when we get off this thing.
Yeah.
Like every
save us,
thing, all the trees are going to be like, huh,
right.
What the hell was that?
Exactly.
Finally, those humans are gone.
Right.
Damn.
Oh, man.
Alrighty.
Well, we at almost 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
And I dare to say the time because I'm not going to edit it this time. So
yes.
I think I'm going to... well, you're probably listening to the second part of this pod because I chopped it up. But
yes. I want to throw out a last quote in honor of Joseph, who's PJP.
Do it.
The one and only. Because I feel like I'm part of this dream that he's building, which is that this pod is like, I think, a really good representative of how, like, when you freestyle, it's like being like a jack of all trades. And like, I mean, I know that Joe Rogan is someone that is quite close to your heart in terms of you looking up to him and admiring him. And it's kind of like, so yeah, like that sometimes people misunderstand what it means to be a jack of all trades, where the full quote is something along the lines of, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But a jack of all trades is better than a master of one. And, you know, you hear so often that podcasts like have to be niche and focused on one thing. And like, that's the only way that you're going to reach like kind of a certain community.
Right.
But it's like, but when you've got so many things to say about so many things, it's like, well, sometimes a jack of all trades is
better
like
than
so
a master
much.
of one.
Yeah, totally. Like, you know, the guy who only knows how to do one move,
Yeah.
he can pull that move one time as many times as he likes. It's definitely less variety, definitely not as interesting. So maybe a master of none, but
I
mean,
I love it that you brought it up. I really do. And I'm going to take this opportunity and tell you, the listeners, that you're not aware of this. Even though Adam asked me before we started not to give him to embarrass him and say how much he contributed to this pod. But seriously, before I even started the first episode, I even talked with Adam about like what to name the podcast. Remember?
I do.
The first one was something with pod instead of God. I can't remember what was it.
I think there were a few ones where like
pod something. I don't know. But yeah, Adam like
there was
awesomely
X's.
helped.
Like
Yeah, it was
somewhere
like, what
there
the
was some
fuck are you
X's.
thinking? Or, that's why I love him, because he's like, when it's real, he's like, dude, seriously, maybe you shouldn't even go that route. But yeah, we were talking about the topics, like what the podcast should be, and I never saw myself being capable or like, you know, focusing on one niche. I would see myself running out of material fairly quick, even if it's the thing that I'm most passionate about, if it's sexuality or whatever. But unfortunately, you know, I've done tons of research before I started this pod, and hands down, 100%, everybody said, if you want to succeed in podcasting, you got to focus on a certain niche, which kind of makes sense, because let's say if you talk about sexuality, you build your tribe and your followers, that's their interest. And if you talk about, I don't know, technology, the next episode, you lose that tribe. And so that kind of makes sense why niche focused podcast, and I would say 99% of podcasts out there are niche focused. But like Adam mentioned, and you guys probably know, I brought him up so many times, that Joe Rogan is my hero and the guy I look up to, and I may even copycat sometimes, especially with the clicking of the ice cubes in the glass or whatever. But I think he's successful for a reason because of that. Not only is a great interviewer, but I think personally for me, why I love his podcast is because they're not 15, 20 minutes long. I love those 3-hour podcasts, and I love the variety. I love the fact that I don't know what the Joe Rogan experience is going to be next week about, or who is he going to interview. So yeah, when I was discussing it with Adam, we both agreed, and he encouraged me to go for it and just be yourself, and every episode will be something different. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. And I don't know, I don't know. We'll see. I guess time will tell, because this is going against the grain. Like, I've read 4 books already about podcasting. I've read tons of material about it. YouTube channel. Hands down, everyone says if you want to succeed, you got to focus on one thing and build that audience of that one thing. And I'm going against the grain. And if you think about it, there aren't many successful podcasts, variety podcasts. Besides Joe Rogan, I can't think of anyone else.
Not many, but rules are there to be broken.
Yeah.
And I think if there's anything to say about your journey, is that I think that the biggest appeal you have is that people are kind of along for the adventure. Mm-hmm. So that like kind of they can grow with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you are focused on politics or sport or even sexuality, then the life of the podcast and the art of the podcast is more focused on that topic.
Right.
Whereas this way, it's on you. Mm-hmm. And your listeners are really along for, you know, your Alice in Wonderland. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it reminds me of the Cheshire Cat. in Alice in Wonderland. I'm going to butcher this, but the Cheshire Cat asks Alice, where are you going? She says, I don't know. Well, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah.
And I think that right now that's perfect. You don't really need to necessarily know where you're going with this. You just need to know that you are passionate about the idea of making an impact, having an influence.
Right.
And as this thing grows and like as you mold this, you know, into something with a far greater listener base and all that, that will kind of clarify itself. I mean, I feel like, you know, you can always maintain that variety and then have those like certain topics which are like you're really passionate about.
Right.
And that's when, I mean, essentially, I really think that this thing can be an awesome outlet for you. And whether you're road tripping around America or, you know, swimming with sharks in the Maldives, like, yeah, I think this is going to be it's an awesome. This is a companion for you,
right?
This is like,
yeah, totally. Like you said it perfectly. It's a companion, and it's also therapeutic, and also sometimes I think about it. It's a great kind of like an audio digital diary that I don't know. Many years from now, maybe my son can listen to and get to know his father.
Documenting.
I always, you know. And I'm sure for you listeners, you can sympathize with what I'm about to say, that I always beat myself up, and I always, and honestly, and Adam asked me because he probably doesn't want me to embarrass him because he doesn't like to take credit, but he helped me so fucking much. Okay, bottom line, without Adam, we wouldn't be sitting here today. And I think I mentioned this in the first episode, Planet is Born, and it's because of this mixer that's right here that we're recording the podcast. If you don't know the story, just listen to the first episode. That's the first thing. Second thing, I had many times that I was like, no one's listening, no one cares. And honestly, Adam, I salute you for that. Like, he really like listened to the whole podcast and each and every one and gave me the feedback. And he's the one that encouraged me, that I felt like, oh shit, I don't want to let him down. Like, that, you know, he believed in me, and the things that he said is like, oh, he made me think about this, or I don't know. But Adam's the person that really, the reason why we're sitting here. That's why he asked me not to say this, but I'm going to say this anyway. I call him like the silent Planet Joe pod producer or the manager.
I've been told whenever you're embarrassed and people compliment you, just say thank you and shut up.
And before we started the podcast, like, just don't call me the Planet Joe producer or manager. It's like,
I do. Okay, I want to make one point about this because I don't want to take too much credit, which is that I think that Planet Joe, as you mentioned, is something which the pod now is just an extension, and why. In terms of the naming of it, I thought it was important for you to maintain the Planet Joe brand, which is that, like, you're clearly a guy, like a unique guy who lives in his own world, own planet to an extent. And, like, you know, just to clarify, guys, Planet Joe was Joe's bar in Israel, which, like, he wanted people to come and have their own planet and get off, you know, this planet Earth and join Planet Joe. So you guys are not the first guys to fasten their brain seatbelt and, you know, get in that pod. And I think that, you know, as much as this podcasting thing is a new thing for you, the Planet Joe thing most certainly is not.
Right.
And this is just like, this is almost like a natural evolution where, like, I mean, I guess to an extent we are lucky, or you are lucky, in that, like, we are now in this kind of like connected, accessible world, right? Where, like, you have this platform to kind of really share your thoughts on the matter, and, like, people can kind of get to know your internal dialogue in a way that, like, was just not possible beforehand. Right. And so, Planet Joe, as much as I will take some credit and say with pleasure for the inception of the podcast, Planet Joe is not my thing. Planet Joe is most certainly your thing, and I guess I'm delighted to be a part of it, part of the journey. And I already told Joe in a few years from now when he's being interviewed by his idol, Joe Rogan, just don't forget about me.
And I told him, not only am I not going to forget about you're getting a first class ticket, a suite in a hotel, and you'll have 5 call girls waiting in that suite to
Exactly.
spoil you before we record the podcast.
I won't pay them though.
All paid for. But yeah, I mean, you deserve that credit because honestly, I had moments where I was like, especially when you start something. This is the thing with human nature. You want instant feedback, especially nowadays. I'm like, I have 5 listeners. Who gives a fuck? Who's going to listen? And Adam was the one that encouraged me, and it got into a habit. Every time I recorded, the only person I was waiting for is to hear Adam's feedback. And it was like a fucking 10,000 word feedback, which I loved about it. It was so detailed, like for everything I did. And that kind of motivated me to record, at least to hear I don't know, it became a cycle. And then it started growing from the Bernie Sanders episode, Feel the Burn. Mm-hmm. That's when I got, I think, over 100. That was the first time I went over 100. And then my sister, the grief episode, broke the 200 one. And then the sex episode blew off. So yeah, now I have, I don't know, 248 listeners from the last one, which is...
And growing.
And growing, yeah. And I mentioned this before. I started a YouTube channel before, and I did that. And I think my biggest successful viewed one is 132 views. But I ditched the YouTube thing. I talked about it actually. There's an episode.
You referenced it, yeah.
I think I named the episode YouTube Sucks.
Mm-hmm. Difficulties
of YouTube themselves, like why they how they treat their creators. And I was like, fuck that. I'm not like spending years to build my business or whatever on their platform. They can delete you in one day. This one appealed because I actually own it and no one can touch it. But yeah, I was so excited to see, like, not only from the United States and Israel, but I have a lot of quite a few listeners from Ireland, Brazil, Japan, like those places where I see you guys come back too.
International celeb.
Yeah, thanks to Podbean, I could see where you guys are coming from and the length of time you listen to, and it's the most, like, the whole episode almost. So, but yeah, I got to give credit to Adam because, again, without Adam, it wouldn't have happened, especially before even the first podcast because of this mixer. Yeah, if you remember the whole thing, why?
How could I
ordered this amazing Rodecaster Pro mixer. It was like $800, and then when it got to Israel, I had to pay taxes or what was it? $300, another $300 or whatever.
Something like that. Details don't matter. Again, I'll take a sliver of the credit, but yeah, this train has left the station, and ain't nobody gonna stop. Nobody gonna stop you now. Yeah. Choo choo, motherfucker.
Choo choo, motherfuckers. But, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is the second part of the Adam Cartier podcast, Pod. What do you say, Adam? We should do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm loving it.
I think that was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah,
so.
I enjoyed it. And you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity and we'll round it up to 2.5 hours each episode there to talk about how much I enjoyed doing this with Adam. The biggest thing, and I told this to Adam so many times, every time I record, if it's an hour and a half podcast of recording, I spend about 4 hours of editing because I fucking suck when I do it by myself. I have like so many spaces and dead time between each word and trying to think and fuck, this time I enjoyed it because it's live. I don't have to edit. It's literally like live. I don't have to edit anything. I had the time to sit back and just listen and gather my thoughts, and it was just fucking a blast.
I concur. It was awesome. It was fucking awesome.
Fucking awesome. So I think until Adam goes to China and I go to the States, we should do this on a regular basis, like a couple more times. When do you think you're going back? Going to China?
due to start beginning of December. I'll leave here middle of November. So yeah.
Okay, so we got a couple of months. We can do a few more.
Yeah, let's
Squeeze
do
in there.
a couple more. Let's do this.
Cool. All right, my peeps. I never hear from you, but if you feel like it, leave your comments on Planet Joe Pod on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Tell us what you think. Regardless, we'll be back.
Peace and love.
Anything you want to add?
Just that. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Peace and love, my peeps.
Love people, man. Love people.
All right, my peeps, we're wrapping it up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And we both love you. Get back in the pod. We'll send you back to planet Earth. I think Adam's staying on Planet Joe for the night. Yeah. And don't forget to follow Planet Joe Pod everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Peace out. Love ya.